Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, I am honored to welcome Sam Simon, also known as Dementia Man, along with his wife, Susan Simon. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, my pleasure. You know, Sam, I'm going to start it off with you. You know, I introduced you as Sam Simon, but I said you're also known as Dementia Man. What is Dementia Man?
Well, I was diagnosed with Alzheimer's in 2022, and I had previously been diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, and I was confronted with what to do. I think that's true of anybody who gets a diagnosis of a terminal disease, if you want to. I was hesitating on that. MCI wasn't terminal, it was just, but we didn't know why. Alzheimer's doesn't have a cure. So what do? You know, there was a moment I folded into, begin to fold into myself. And you know, Susan here, my cognitive navigator, also my care partner, and I think this is important, I'll be quick. We've been through a similar journey. She had been diagnosed in 2000 with advanced breast cancer. And during her treatment, the doctors pulled me over and said, Sam, they found a post-double mastectomy lump and they went dark. They said, get ready. And so we've been through it before, and it's odd that I reflect about it, and we do. It in some ways prepared us a little bit. And so I had to decide what to do. So I wrote a play about that and a book. You can see behind me. And I was involved in the artistic community. And particularly around as I had been MCI and now I was getting diagnosed, I would be at some meetings and I would tell my artistic colleagues. They said to me, write about it, put it on the page and on stage. Wasn't intuitive right away, but I began to do that, and I was motivated most urgently when I heard a podcast by a book author who had written a book. I'm not going to give the title of it because I don't want anyone to buy it, in which she tells the story of her husband Brian being diagnosed with early stage Alzheimer's, which is my diagnosis. And then the rest of it, and she said, she quoted her husband as saying, I don't want to die. But I don't want to keep becoming a lesser and lesser person. And for a nanosecond, I said, I wonder, shall I do that? And it made me so angry that I was even thought about it. And that I might be considered a lesser person. That's motivated me to really start thinking about writing something. And when I dove into creating the one-person play, and the title is, and this could be almost breaking news here. I was just back from a conference in Florida and met the gentleman who's behind a campaign. I do it in my play. I rant against the word dementia, and there's a movement to get Congress to enact some legislation. I might end up renaming the play An Existential Journey, Sam's Alzheimer's journey or experience or something like that. But anyway, is that about right, Susan?
Right.
I have to check with her.
Yep. I want to quickly, Sam, I want to go to Susan for a moment here. Susan, you went through your diagnosis with the breast cancer, and you're coming out of that. You're hopefully starting to feel better. You guys think, okay, now we're going to get back on with our lives. I know that's how I would feel. And then it hits you when Sam gets his diagnosis. What went through your mind? How did you process that? And what was the approach you had taken right after what you went through?
Basically, I had a very positive attitude about everything because I knew deep in my heart that I would survive. So I said to him, we need to think about this and think about what can bring joy rather than worry to what's going on. And we will do the best we can with it. Yeah. And I will be there for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is so important, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I interviewed somebody the other day, Sam, and they wrote a book. It's called Grateful Gratitude Attitude. And, it's kind of what I'm hearing from the two of you, and before we go back to Sam, Susan, as you're taking on this role as his, cognitive navigator, how do you maintain that positive outlook and that positive approach? Because, we're humans, right? We all have emotions. I'm sure, I might be saying, why me? Why my wife? Why my husband? Whatever the situation is. And, that I think that's fair that might sometimes creep in there. How do you block that aspect out and just stay so positive and supportive of Sam and the work he's doing?
I think basically from the feedback that he gets from the work and when we talk to people and how we will get maybe a call or someone writing an email that said, I really appreciated the play that you did and it brought hope. So I think that if we think about hope, and that's just part of my personality, I think. Yeah. I don't go dark, but I try to stay, and yes, there will be times probably. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and you think you're prepared for it. But when the time comes, who knows how you're going to respond. But right now, it's the word hope and also to advocate, to educate people. And that if you keep your mind on that and how you're going to do it, then it does keep you being grateful and being hopeful.
That's wonderful.
I want to add to that, though, because two things. One, during her disease journey, there was a day, I think we had gotten some really bad news, and we drove home, and we had what I call the conversation. And it's like, all right, now what do we do, Susan? And this was me. Let's sell my company. Let's go take a trip around the world. Let's go fill it. By the way, we don't have bucket lists. I said, let's create a bucket list. Yeah. Let's go. She said, Sam, if we're not living the life we want to live now, let's don't change it because I might die, but because we're not happy with the life we're living. Yeah. And she maintains she maintains that attitude. We don't need to have the conversation again. And she does it. But I also then want to add, we are affirmative in talking about this issue, the risk. New Year's Eve, we don't say, oh my God, Sam, this is the last year. We talk about how do we find joy, she says, this year. What do we do? We do it with the knowledge that there's a slippery slope we could fall down. So we have to be affirmative about working at that positive attitude. She's a big help.
No, that's wonderful. Sam, how long ago were you diagnosed again?
It was in 2022 with Alzheimer's.
2022. So when you look back at 2022 and you look at present day, 2025, have you been able to notice any changes, or how are you doing health-wise? Do you still feel the same as you did in 22, or are you feeling better? Or
No, I'm more aware of the disease. I'm more symptomatic. Everybody, there is a saying, you probably know it. If you know one person with dementia, you know one person. Yeah. And I'll tell you, I get a lot of, oh, you don't have it. You're fine. Oh, I can guarantee you, I have it. They're big blank spots. They just manifest themselves differently. And even we just came back from Orlando at the On Aging conference. It was great, but it was so anxiety provoking. And I don't remember the details of the trip. Everything I used to be, boom, boom, boom. You know exactly how to get on a plane and everything. It's like you're reinventing it again, or you're having to remember how to do it. And it's true about little things and everyday things. And I'm trying to remember that because it happens every day. The stress is on Susan because it happens here more than anywhere else, that I don't remember what we're supposed to do, where we're supposed to be. I'll get very agitated, which is a big issue right now, and frustrated. I'm not mad at anybody other than the inability.
You're mad at the disease,
Right?
Or the disease, but I was about to cuss. I can't. Where was it, or what did I do? What am I thinking of? What am I supposed to be doing? Oh, and just look at, the things we don't get on our, this is yesterday, the things I put it on the calendar. No, I put it on the calendar. No, but it's not on the calendar, right? They seem like little things, but they paint the day in some ways. Maybe an interesting way to define.
Before we move on, you used the word paint, and when you and I first met, it was on Lori LeBay and I. We have our show Conscious Caregiving, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But you discussed the painting right behind your shoulder there, and the viewers and listeners, for the viewers, they can see it. The listeners, you're going to describe it, but talk about that painting, because that really had a profound impact on me the first time I heard you talk about it, and you gave us a copy of it to put in the video. Talk about what the meaning of that painting is.
Well, I'll do that. Susan just mentioned one of the impacts on people and audiences. I actually have a new one to add to this. The debut of the play Dementia Man was at the Washington, D.C., called the Capitol Fringe Festival. And that was in July of 2023. And we had, 4 performances and 2 talkbacks. This was in July. So August, September, October, 3 months and a week later, I get an email from Mrs. Holan, his last name was. She said she and her husband, who's a dentist, had been at the play in July. And he had dementia. She told me that, this is still every time I say it, she sent me an email, and the name said, he died last week. Okay, she just lost her husband for many, many years. She sends me an email with a copy of that picture and says, I want to donate the copyright to that picture to you. I want to give you this picture. He drew it, and it's a self-image of memory loss of himself. And you're talking about humility and stun. I couldn't imagine that in some way that it so moved her and him, the experience, that they would know that. And I love that, right? Because I have moments like that. It is a good, it's a self-portrayal of his feeling and memory loss. And I think you can relate, but to have somebody do that. So I mentioned we were in Orlando last week and at the On Aging conference, and I had a workshop. They had 3,000 workshops. No, they had a bunch of workshops. So I had an hour workshop about Dementia Man and some of the advocacy coming from it. And it was an hour-long workshop. And was it later that day or
the next morning?
The next morning, somebody there, and I wonder approached us and said, after you're experiencing your showcase, I went to my room and I've written a poem for you.
Wow.
And I'll have it here. And if we have time, we can read it later. But that I love it, and it's not a brag. I couldn't have imagined that my work can provoke those kinds of emotions in people.
Why don't you go ahead and read the poem now if you'd like, Sam.
Okay, it's by PJ, and I'm going to spell his name, Family, but Fameli. He copyrights it, so it's 2025. There's a liminal waltz for Samuel A. Simon. He once was a troublemaker, chalk in his pockets, questions on fire, the kind of child who talked to stars and dared the rules to blink first. Now he walks a quieter edge where clocks melt into shadows and keys hide like clever riddles. He swears he almost remembers. This is the liminal world, the place between the tethered and the drifting, where yesterday wears new clothing and the morning rewrites itself by noon. They call it mild cognitive impairment, but it really is standing in a room with all the lights on and still not finding the door. Yet he dances in the ballroom of his mind. He waltzes with everyone that he has ever known. The rhythm stumbles, yes, but never the heart. There's music in the nothingness place, soft as the voice of his beloved. His compass through the fog is steady north when memory spins. She is a map he's lost and still somehow follows. She reads the signs when he cannot, writes love letters in the margins of his days. Yes, he forgets the keys and names and sometimes time itself. But love, that's the one art he's never lost.
That's beautiful. Yeah.
It is.
And this was a gentleman that saw your play?
And this was just a showcase version.
Wow.
20 minutes rather than the full hour of it.
But he wants to bring you to.
Yeah, he's from Williamsburg, Virginia, and is working on booking the whole play.
Oh, wonderful. That's tremendous. I want to ask, Susan real quickly. Susan, when you see the profound impact that Sam has been able to have really in a short amount of time, we're not talking about decades or even, 5-10 years. We're talking about less than 3 years total. What does that mean to you?
It means, I think, that what he wants to accomplish will not be forgotten.
Yeah.
It'll be there. And the words that he says do go forward to people who give them, again, the theme of hope keeps coming up, that there's hope. And when I, heard that poem, I said, he reads you, Sam. That man knew you just from that short little bit, but he reads you, and that is you. That is the you that we will remember, as opposed to, thinking of something that is not like that.
Yeah, it's incredible. I always say too, with just us, and it's on a totally different scale and purpose, we're reaching people like Sam is reaching people, and we hear from a lot of people, you hear from a lot of people, but there's countless others that we'll never know how we've impacted or touched or, made an impression on. And it's just remarkable. And, the work you're doing, Sam, it's monumental because, you can speak to it from the firsthand perspective. You're living with dementia. You're not just a researcher or a physician. You're a patient of dementia, but you know it better than probably researchers and physicians because you're living with it. Do you agree with that?
Well, it's complicated. Yes, and as they say, and yeah, and there are people been through so many things. I also, been on both sides of the caregiver, and now I'm being recipient of care. And I am so in awe of those who care for people like me. I know my journey with Susan, she was always Susan. She was determined. Yeah, I cried sometimes, but she made me go out of the room to cry. Couldn't cry in front of her. But she was always Susan. And I'm beginning to change. I'm being, when a poem I wrote, I don't have it handy, but one of the lines was, I wonder what the Sam and me then will be like. And we'll know about the Sam and me now. But it will be a different person than she started with. I mean, we all change, and yet she is, and she and the other care partners, or cognitive love, I call them love partners too. They stay and they care for, and they hold us, even though we have gone through these changes. It is a remarkable, and the work you guys do. The challenge and the reason I think that getting rid of the word dementia is positive, right, is because it so invokes the end stages. And I've been surprised to both learn and experience that there's very little understanding that the journey can be, as my internist, as my neurologist said to me, 5 to 10 years. We hear dementia and we think of the person in the room staring up into the sky. Yeah. And it can be, not always. Right. Everybody's different. Sometimes the disease moves quickly. But 5 to 10 years before it gets really bad. And the journey in that part is a little bit what I'm representing. It's real, but it's incremental. It's hard to see for the other world, for the everyday world. And how do you manage to find meaning and purpose during that time? And I think that's an important. There's more and more data out there showing that having meaning or purpose in your life during the disease is really, really important in adding years or meaningful years to the disease era.
Yeah, absolutely. I fully agree with that. And I think for anybody in any situation, just having a purpose to get up in the morning and get your day going is healthy and beneficial. You said something a little bit ago about being a troublemaker. So you call yourself a troublemaker and an advocate, but what are you advocating for, Sam?
Well, I think at the bottom line, I want to be an example of having meaning in life, that getting a terminal diagnosis. And the theme of the play is that life with the disease is worth living. I am a strong advocate for not, I don't like to be negative, for finding meaning, living well as you can with the disease. There's a narrative that life with the disease is not worth living. It's called accompanied suicide. There is a bit of a movement in this country and generally that once you get diagnosed with, so in that book I talked about, where the woman's husband was diagnosed, it was all about getting to Switzerland to kill himself. So a good piece of this is to demonstrate. In fact, my whole set is a theoretical hotel in Switzerland that we don't go to. We pretend it imagines we're there. So I sit there with a pink cup with poison, would be poison. But we reject that. So that's part of it. But I used to be very much involved in the disability movement. What if we had cognitive navigation is available as curb cuts? Just think, what is cognitive navigation? Part of it is signage. Part of it is training people on what if I walked into any Walmart or Target or medical building, and there are signs with usually those yellow flowers, cognitive navigation desk. where I could go and get some help or get some information. I performed in Cedar Falls, Iowa, at a very large senior living center that we're working with a local college and the grocery stores there. Mm. And the grocery stores in that town have signs in front of some of the carts that I have a cognitive disability. And separate lanes. And they can get help. And they don't have to, it's a common sense thing. Rather than me holding up a line somewhere, trying to figure out how to get everything out and make it work, I'll go someplace that'll be slower. The same thing, whether it's a department store or a drugstore, there's always a ramp. These are like cognitive ramps. How about that?
Yeah.
Cognitive ramps that would serve. And by the way, I suspect a lot of people, even without a formal disease, who are older, would take advantage of that. Absolutely. And so that's another advocacy piece. And there's one other that I'm blanking on. Cognitive ramps, cognitive navigators.
Getting rid of the word dementia.
And changing the word. And but there was one other. Anyway, I'll remember it. But
okay.
It is as much advocating that and demonstrating it to the extent that I can. So I accommodate myself. On stage. No, by the way, to everybody out there, no, I cannot remember my lines. I cannot memorize my lines. I can carry a script and be familiar with them. And Susan sits in the front row with the script. And if I seem lost or fumble, she can cue me.
Okay.
And it runs smoothly. Sometimes people don't know whether it's a built-in scene or it's real. But we can do that for everybody, I think, in real life that are at the earliest stages. And the tragedy narrative of it. Also trying to help. For example, I think what helps us, so in the breast cancer world, there used to be an organization called Why Me? It changed its name. I forget or maybe it went out of business. This self-pity, I call that self-pity, but I don't, people may have had different dreams. Right. And they're now different. And so we can still live. I guess the other purpose is just meaningful life, that there are things we can do, figure it out. Maybe right now I can still drive, and I went on my own volition, got to ask my doctor for a prescription for a vocational rehab facility to check out my capacity to drive.
Okay.
I don't want to cause an accident. And I went through all their training, not training, but they have a process. Because it can be anybody, people without limbs, they double check, or other diseases. So they also do people with cognitive. And they test. And I can still do it. They are cautioned, it's better if I have somebody in the car with me. But I want to do this responsibly as well.
Right. And I love that you're saying that, Sam. One of the things we're very passionate about is people understanding what dementia is and not what it isn't. Myths and stigmas, and that people living with dementia still are able and capable to be productive members of society, of their own households, of their lives. And the average person who doesn't know any better, like you said, they hear the word dementia, they're thinking that person laying in the bed, looking up at the ceiling, or laying, sitting in the rocker, not moving. And I think what you're doing is so vitally important to help raising that awareness and educating the public. Look what I'm doing. I'm putting on a whole one-man show. I'm traveling around the country, going the.
I thought you were saying what you're doing.
Oh no, you. I'm saying you. But I want to talk a little bit more about you two and your family. Did you come from a family of troublemakers? And are you both, still pushing along? How many years have you been married?
58 years, 8 months, 3 days, 32 seconds now.
Where?
Well,
No, May, June,
So,
July, 3 months left.
yeah, so before we hit our 59th, we're almost at 60. We
Wonderful.
were young. She was 20, I was 21, still in college. You know, actually, no, we had a 25th wedding anniversary and we named it the Oh No Party. It was, oh no, they're too young to get married. Oh no,
It's not going to last.
oh no. There was all these oh no's around it. In some ways, yeah, I was. I almost think there should be. By the way, now that it comes up, I also learned I have a genetic risk for Alzheimer's.
You had the testing done?
Yeah, APOE4, but we should talk about that in a minute. But and maybe it's because I'm the only boy with 4 sisters, and I got 3 of them older than me. So maybe trying to get attention, I always, you would think that the only boy with 4 women, that the parent, my dad, and everybody, I'd be spoiled.
Yeah.
But it felt like I was always trying to get, and this 5 people, I wanted to be noticed. Maybe that was it. I don't know. I have some stories in the play, but like when I was 14 years old, I already had this gene. The city council had of El Paso, Texas, where I was born, enacted a curfew, 11 p.m. curfew. If you were 17 and younger, you had to be in your home, couldn't be out. And I saw and read and could tell that they were discriminating against El Paso's on the border, the Mexican Americans, we called them Chicanos down there. I all myself did research. I literally wrote a piece of paper. I found out that Nelson Rockefeller, the new governor of New York, had thought that curfews were unconstitutional. And I just got on a bus. We only had one car, and I didn't tell my parents. Go downtown to a city council meeting. And, I still remember because the doors were so big. It's like these big, giant doors. You're walking into heaven almost. But it was me and some other guy who turned out to be a reporter in the room. And at the end of the meeting, they say, any comments? So I raise my hand. I walk up, 14-year-old kid, and I lecture them. I tell them that even Nelson Rockefeller thought it was unconstitutional. And I, tell them how horrible it was that they were enforcing them only in the, certain neighborhoods. And that got me on the front page of the newspaper the next morning. My parents hadn't known what I did, and they were not happy. But it feels like, no, it does. In retrospect, you look over a lifetime. I know I have that. It's a physical response in me. And I think there are other people I know, and I've had a chance to literally work with some of them, more, that when I see something that seems just unjust or wrong, I feel it. I get angry. It builds up. And so my first professional job was to work for Ralph Nader. Most people still know who, at least our age, know who he was. We need some more Ralph Naders today. He wrote the book Unsafe at Any Speed. He became a national figure when his book Unsafe at Any Speed said that the Corvair, a new hot sports car by General Motors, would roll over when people sped in it. It would, and this was like an expose. And as a result of his work, people don't realize before Ralph Nader, it was a job of the users of products to use them safely. Even if, whereas today, they have to be designed to work safely as they will be used. So General Motors had to know that some people are going to drive at 70, not just 55. Right. And that if it rolls over at 70 as used, it's not the fault. You don't get off scot-free. Of course, they made the mistake of then trying to discredit him, and they hired people to follow him and all that stuff. But so I was a consumer advocate professionally for a number of years, and just built off of that in my lifetime. So I've been at this era, I like to call myself a professional troublemaker. I exaggerate a little bit. But that's, and I hope there are other people that do that. I mean, I usually don't do it, but I wrote even with my Alzheimer's, I'm credited as the editor and compiler of this book. It came out in 2023.
Read the title, Sam, for our listeners.
Choosing the Public Interest, Essays from the First Public Interest Research Group.
Wow.
So there, for those, two of the authors actually passed since even during writing that, but those of us still around from 1970 talked about what brought us to go into this career path, and why shouldn't other young people today? And there is, I think, troublemaking in that way. Our choice growing up at that time was often to go out into the streets. There was a lot of demonstrations and stuff, and I chose to instead try to work the legal system. And Susan was just having our kids at the time.
Yes, you have 2 children and 4 grandchildren, right?
Yeah. And we're so lucky. They live near us, and our son will brag as a member of the Virginia legislature, the General Assembly. It's 100 members. He's 26 in seniority.
Wow.
And our daughter is a pediatric dentist.
Okay. Wonderful.
Lives nearby suburban Maryland. So we're very fortunate. We're good. Our daughter can be the backup for all the medical stuff we hear.
How did they respond when you shared with them the news? Was your son's response different than your daughter's? Did they take it well? How did they respond?
I think they responded well. It's not their first. Remember, this is not their first experience. It has had less dramatic impact on it than when Susan.
Okay.
If they were younger, they were still in school. My son was diagnosed. He just joined the Army JAG Corps. He and his new wife are going to go to Korea for, be in the Army there, and they actually got a compassionate transfer back to be close to us. So we have a wonderful family. No negative family dynamics of any sort. They're here for us. Anything we need, they're there for us, and we don't want to distract them from their journey either.
Yeah.
And we were lucky that it wasn't that dramatic moving from the one trip to Korea to in his career. So we're fortunate. I still have a couple of sisters, two sisters still living, and we're a close family. We've been very fortunate in that regard.
Wonderful.
My parents, I guess it's in the play. We come out of, we were probably lower middle income. My dad actually was a traveling salesman. If people remember Death of a Salesman, he could have been Willie Loman, the guy who ran. My dad did not commit suicide, but his path where he had been working for so long as a that traveling sales, people don't know what traveling salesmen were in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
You had a car, you took out your back seat, filled it with sample cases, that is, samples of your product. And he drove from store to store, small community stores, and showed his children's and infants wear, and they ordered through him. That's how we used to sell things, at least at the smaller stores. My mom grew up in Louisiana. She was a flamenco dancer as a young lady.
Okay.
We had pictures of her in her castanets, and she eventually became a self-taught, a speed typist and a self-taught bookkeeper, and she could work in a small business. Very different era.
Yeah, very different.
They weren't troublemakers. They came from very large families on both sides, and all about family. I remember many things. And you did too. The big family dinners, and there was I guess once a month poker night at our house. We're all 15 people around a poker table. Penny ante, but So, you know,
Yeah, your family played poker. My father had a barbecue pit in the backyard, and every Sunday all the relatives came. We all got together and had, barbecue, and they brought the side dishes. So when we were thinking of getting married, we both said we come from pretty much the same type of background where family is very important.
Yes.
And I had a grandmother that lived with us. So growing up the whole time. So I didn't have just a mother, but I had a grandmother looking after me. So it was very similar. And I think that's where we got our footings from of what we wanted.
And values. And it is, just, it's not a brag. You look back on our life, but I think that was having that model from our parents, both of us, that family first, is really helpful. I think we pretty much got that within our children and grandchildren. We're very lucky in that way.
Yeah, very fortunate. I know we're coming up to the end here, Sam. I want to get a few things covered before we have to part ways, but I want to go back to, Susan as your cognitive navigator. Walk viewers and listeners through what exactly that means. Is there a normal day of Susan navigating for you, or is it just very day by day? Do you have routines that you guys go through? Kind of explain what her cognitive navigation means and, what that's meant to you.
Well, it is evolving as the disease is evolving, I would say. And, we're working harder right now on getting the days described before they start and routines. We're lucky. We're still in pretty good physical health, and we both exercise every morning, but she makes sure that happens. Look on the calendar, and that helps. And when we go places, she takes the lead sometimes, and particularly in the traveling too. It's not bright. She's not wearing this beacon. I'm a navigator stuff. It is just, for speaking from my end, it's huge. It allows me to be comfortable, to know where we're going, to follow, to be led, but I don't think she thinks she leads me, but she does. And I don't think I could do a fraction of this without it. It isn't at this, in the home, they're the smaller things, but they're real, they're where we keep things, keys, wallets. I mean, again, it's almost stereotypical. The number of times, it can be a couple of times a day where I can't find it. It can be the car keys in my wallet, where I put a piece of paper, where I put the shirt that I was supposed to put someplace. She almost always knows. That's a small thing. The bigger things are these day-to-day activities, making sure, 3 times, Sam, the heart doctor, said he wanted office, said you need to make an appointment. So I finally did it thanks to her. I just didn't remember. It isn't that I'm reluctant to do it, but I forgot. And so she doesn't forget. And Oh, but by the way, that's the third advocacy piece. I know the neurology world. It needs to be radically changed. The most important thing, Medicare right today will pay for a breast navigator when a family and a woman is going through breast cancer. We want a cognitive navigation. If you have to have somebody outside or pay for it, then Medicare cover that. We want every neurology office in which they're diagnosing dementia, for the broader word. It's not just Alzheimer's, it's frontal lobal, it's also that there is in that office a social worker system or other advisory system. So you can walk out and here's where you might go. Here's some other resources. Here's what typically happens. We walked out and we were in, the first neurologist, we switched. He said, I got to go, bye. And we went to the front desk. He's left no follow-up appointments, and we'll call you if he wants to see you again. We were like floating in space. We had no idea.
You know what they call that? You know what they call that? Diagnose and adios.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's got to change.
It has to. It has to. You know, Sam, when we first started talking, you know, Susan, I don't know if you saw this when Sam was with Lori LeBay and we were talking about myths, stigmas, and dementia. And, you know, it happened to come up. One of the issues that I'm very much on the front lines of and that I kind of led the charge with is the ethics of dementia and social media. Now, Sam, you know, is a very public figure. He's doing this voluntarily. He's able to provide consent. Sam, being a lawyer, you get all this, I know. But what about the people that are not competent to provide consent and they're having their images, pictures, and video of them posted all over the internet on all these platforms? The family's never going to know about it because the family isn't associated with these people that are doing it. They wouldn't know them from Adam. And the person never provided their consent. You know, Sam, that's an issue I'm very passionate about. I would love to get your perspective on what you think, because I will tell you before you answer, we held a whole panel discussion on this about 2 years ago on All Home Care Matters. I put together 9 of the world's leading dementia experts, influencers, educators. Lori was a guest on that panel as well. And Dr. Jennifer Butte, I don't know if either of you know her. She's a physician from the UK, was very highly regarded, high ranking. She diagnosed herself with dementia and she was on the panel, the only person on that panel living with dementia. And she chimed in and said, I'm the only one here with dementia, so I feel like I have a good perspective, which, you know, she does, just like Sam does. She goes, but whether it's for good, productive reasons or it's bad, negative reasons, it should not matter, good or bad. Consent is consent at the end of the day. And unless that person or their advocate provides that consent, social media should have safeguards in place from protecting these people from having their pictures and videos and their images shared without consent. Sam, what do you think about that?
Yes, hard yes. And, you know, so I used to be a public figure in my other roles in life, particularly around, by the way, telecommunications. Some people blame me for breaking up the Bell Telephone Company. I was on Oprah Winfrey talking about how to find long distance information in the wake of that.
Wow.
But I now actually, we are in a crisis around things like that, because now your image can not only be used without your consent, somebody can create a digital version of you and do it. I'm an advocate for, and God, I don't want to get us in trouble, but still, I think just like when broadcasting started, they created this comprehensive regulatory system to understand it better. The technology has moved to a degree that we don't understand right now what's going on and the impact. Everybody needs protected, but particularly those of us Absolutely. Who can't, you know, arguably might not be even capable of giving consent. And it's not the why you want it, because it's everywhere. And in some ways it's maybe the thing I can do. Although I want that easier, by the way. I'll say it. I had a conversation with the disability office of Microsoft, and I want them to give us access. And by the way, if anybody here is using the new Outlook and is confused by it, if you click on help, it'll give you the option to go back to the old one.
That's a great tip.
I did not know that, because there were several people that we're all together saying, oh my God, this new thing, I can't figure out the changes. It's so hard, because it also takes us out of sight. Not only is this the misuse of our images, but all of a sudden we're gone because we can't figure out how to use them. where we could still stay on productively, particularly for work and things. But if and they can put it on their budget under accommodations for the ADA, in my opinion. But it is a very complicated but obvious. Your point is obvious and right.
Yeah.
You should never be allowed to share an image of someone without their prior consent. And being on Facebook doesn't mean I give consent and for somebody to go on and see it or however it gets there.
Absolutely.
And it's hard to enforce.
Absolutely.
It's hard to enforce.
We'll keep working on it, Sam. And, change doesn't happen quickly, unfortunately, right?
No, and how do we make some of this change work for us? I don't have good ideas yet. Although it could be good. That's why I want to get some of these companies like Microsoft or Apple to figure out how there's a version of what they have that missing the other technology. But that would work better for people who need something simple.
Yeah, absolutely. In closing, I just want to say thank you to you, Susan, so much for joining us today. And, thank you for letting this man right here do what he does, because we all know the truth, right, Sam? You're not doing it without Susan.
Without Susan, then none of it would be.
Yes, but and sincerely thank you, Sam, so much for, continuing to just move forward and helping people to understand this better, help people to find that hope that a lot of them are lacking. They aren't all blessed with the hope and, positive outlook that you two have. And that's needed. That's needed, not just for dementia, but just for society as a whole, I think.
And any terminal diagnosis, I call that life, but it's life's journey. And so, yes, anything that happens there at the end, towards the end, you work to be as meaningful and impactful as you can and live the best. We want to live the best life we can. Yeah. And it is an attitude thing. It takes work.
Yes.
And thank you. I love that. It's twice now, right? So
twice. We're going to go for 3.
We're going to come up with some big thing, get a lot more attention.
But before we go, where would you like people to go to learn more about you and your play? www.dementiaman.com. And you'll see I try to do a weekly podcast, and it's on YouTube, but the link is right there on the website at the bottom. Wonderful. And we'll have that in the show notes as well as up on the screen. And if somebody wanted to reach out to you directly, do you have an email?
sam@dementiaman.com.
Wonderful.
And my mission is for as many people who need to see the show get to. I don't do a video portion because there is a lot of discussion about this alternate decision that's out there that suicide. I don't like to do that. And so I never want money to be a problem. I try to recover my cost. I'm not, we're about to be 80 this year. So I'm not doing it as a business.
Absolutely. Well, keep doing it. And we're here to support the two of you however we can, whenever we can. And so Sam and Susan, Simon, thank you two so much for just making such a great positive difference.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Sam and Susan Simon for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.